My name is Natalie Mercer, and I was 32 years old when my husband walked into our kitchen holding a pregnancy test and blew my marriage apart with one sentence. He said, "I'm pregnant, but I'm not sure if it's yours." There are moments in life that do not feel real until much later, when your body finally catches up to what your ears heard. That was one of them. Even now, when I replay it, I can still see the angle of the morning light across the counter, the steam rising off the skillet, the cheap grocery store orange juice sweating on the table, and Daniel standing there like a man trying to decide how much damage he could survive if he looked sorrowful enough. I had been home for less than 12 hours. 3 days into my home stretch after hauling freight out of Seattle and back, 2 long weeks of mountains, bad coffee, way stations, and sleep that never really counted. I had been up since 5 because trucker hours do not turn off just because you park in your own driveway. I was making breakfast, actually enjoying the silence for once, thinking maybe I would catch up on sleep, maybe finally fix the garage door that had been squeaking like it was dying every time I opened it. Then Daniel came into the kitchen carrying that test like it was both a confession and a shield. He said we needed to talk. That phrase by itself never means anything good, but there was something rehearsed in the way he said it. Too measured, too careful. Like he had been practicing the exact amount of tremble to put in his voice. Here is the thing. I drive long haul. I have for 8 years. I move freight up and down the western half of the country and sometimes farther when the money is right. I am gone a lot. Sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes close to 3. Then I am home for 4 or 5 days before the next run. It is hard work, but it is clean work. The money is solid. Last year I cleared just under 95,000. I like the road. I like the independence. I like knowing exactly what needs to be done and how to do it. Daniel knew all of that before he married me. We had been married 3 years, together 5 total. He worked as a project manager at a tech company downtown. Good at charming people, good at sounding composed, good at turning ordinary conversations into little performances, where he always came out looking like the more thoughtful person. We had talked about kids in that vague someday way couples do when they want the idea more than the reality. We were not actively trying, but we were not avoiding it either. So when he said he was pregnant, I turned the stove off and sat down. Unexpected, yes, but not impossible. We were 32. We owned the house. Bills were paid. Career stable. I remember thinking, very briefly, that maybe this would be one of those messy but survivable adult pivots. Not the timeline I expected, but life rarely asks permission. Then he said the second part. But I'm not sure if it's yours or Sienna's. Sienna from his office. Sienna, who had been texting him constantly for months. Sienna, who he told me was just a friend when I asked about her 6 months earlier, because her name kept glowing across his screen after 10 at night. Sienna with the loud laugh I had heard once over speakerphone. Sienna who sent memes during dinner and somehow always needed something urgent when I was home. That's Sienna. I looked at him standing in my kitchen, his hands shaking just enough to look believable, and I realized this was not panic. It was damage control. He had known exactly how he wanted to frame this. "Tell me everything," I said. And right on cue, the tears started. He sat across from me and pressed his fingers against his eyes like he was trying to hold himself together. He said it happened during the Henderson project about 6 weeks earlier. Late nights. Pressure. Too much stress. They had been working closely. Things blurred. It happened once or twice. Maybe 3 times. He was confused. He still loved me. The pregnancy made him realize how badly he had messed up. He did not want to build our future on lies. I sat there doing the math in my head. 6 weeks ago, I had been running loads through the Midwest, gone 16 straight days, home for 5. And during those 5 days, Daniel had been all over me, more affectionate than usual, more physical, initiating almost every time, bringing me coffee in bed, asking me to stay up later, looking at me like he missed me so much it hurt. Now all of that had a different shape. "Let me make sure I understand," I said. And I remember setting my coffee mug down very carefully because suddenly every movement felt sharp enough to cut me. While I was hauling freight through 3 time zones, eating gas station garbage and sleeping in my cab, you were sleeping with your coworker. Then I came home, and you were sleeping with both of us, maybe on back-to-back days. And now you're pregnant and don't know who the other mother is. His face tightened instantly. "It sounds worse when you say it like that." I let that hang in the air between us. He was defensive already, not ashamed, not broken, defensive. "I'm trying to be honest," he said. "I could have let you think it was yours." The nerve of that sentence almost made me laugh. Instead, I stared at him. He doubled down on the crying, said he was trying to do the right thing now, said transparency mattered, said we could work through this, said maybe the baby could bring us closer, make us finally face the distance between us. That part nearly impressed me. It takes talent to cheat on your wife, get pregnant by another woman, and somehow pitch the pregnancy as a relationship-building exercise. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I did not slam my fist into the table or ask the kind of questions people ask in movies. I just sat there and watched him cry and realized, with a calm that scared even me, that the man across from me did not know me nearly as well as he thought he did. All right, I said, we schedule a DNA test. We find out whose pregnancy it is. Then we talk. He blinked at me. You're not mad? I'm furious, I said, but anger won't change biology. When can they do the test? It turned out we had to wait until he was at least 9 weeks along for the prenatal blood test, unless we wanted to wait until after birth. I told him to make the appointment as soon as possible. He looked shocked by how calm I was, then relieved, then emotional, all over again. He came around the table and hugged me, full breakdown mode, shaking, crying into my shoulder, saying he knew I would handle this with more grace than he deserved, that he knew I would be an amazing mother if the baby was mine, that this mistake did not have to destroy us if we did not let it. I hugged him back. I even rubbed his back. Then I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub, and stared at the tile while the house went quiet around me. I was not the forgiving wife he thought he married. I was the woman who had just been handed more ammunition than he was smart enough to notice. That afternoon I called Veronica Shaw. We went to high school together and somehow stayed close through jobs, moves, divorces, funerals, and all the ordinary wreckage of adult life. She was a divorce attorney now, ruthless when she needed to be, sharp enough to make judges sit straighter. She picked up on the second ring. Well, she said, you never call this early unless someone's dead or you need legal advice. Quick question, I said. If a spouse admits to adultery, how does that play in divorce? There was a pause, then the creak of her chair. What happened? Daniel cheated on me with a coworker. He's pregnant. Says it might be mine or hers. Silence, then a long breath. Nat, she said quietly, tell me you recorded that. No. You need evidence in writing. Recording, texts, emails, admission, timeline, anything. From this point forward, document everything, and I mean everything. I leaned over the sink and looked at myself in the mirror while she talked. I looked normal. That was the strangest part. Same face, same hair pulled back, same old sleep shirt. But something inside me had already shifted into a colder gear. House? She asked. Mine. Bought it before the marriage. He moved in after. Good, very good. Shared accounts? Joint checking. One shared credit card. Close what you can today. Open accounts in your name only. Move your direct deposit. Leave enough in joint to cover bills so you don't look reckless. But stop the bleeding now. We talked for almost 40 minutes. She laid it out cleanly. No speeches, no pity. Document everything. Lock down finances. Stay calm. Do not tip him off. Do not threaten. Do not rage text. File first when the time is right. Let facts do the work. When I hung up, I got moving. First, I went to his iPad, still logged into everything because Daniel had always treated privacy like something other people worried about. His messages with Sienna were all there, months of them. Nothing graphic enough to make me flinch, but more than enough to bury him. Miss you already. Wish you stayed later. Thinking about last night. Can't stop replaying your mouth on me. And my personal favorite, she still has no idea. I backed everything up to 3 different cloud folders. Then I pulled phone records from our cell account. Calls to Sienna 2 or 3 times a day for 4 months. Texts constantly, even on nights I was home. Even during our anniversary dinner back in June, when I remembered him putting his phone face down and smiling at me over candlelight, like there was nothing in the world between us. I downloaded 6 months of records. Then the bank. I moved 70% of what was in joint checking into a new account at a different bank. Left enough behind to cover utilities, insurance, and mortgage autopay, so nothing bounced and nothing looked sudden. I canceled the joint credit card and opened a new one in my name only. Changed direct deposit routing before my next payout hit. Daniel made decent money, around $62,000, but I had been the higher earner the whole marriage, and Veronica said that mattered. Then I found Sienna's direct office line. I called her from my cell first. She answered on the 3rd ring, polished voice, all business. This is Sienna Hart. Hi, I said. This is Natalie, Daniel's wife. We need to talk about his pregnancy. Click. She hung up immediately. I called back 5 minutes later from a different number. She answered more cautiously this time. Hello? This is still Natalie. A sharp inhale. Then she started talking too fast. I didn't know everything at first, okay? He said your marriage was basically over. He said you two were living separate lives. He said you were never home. I'm a truck driver, I said. I've had the same schedule for 8 years. He married me, knowing exactly what my job looked like. I'm engaged, she blurted out. My fiancé doesn't know anything about this. That caught my attention. What's his name? A beat. Connor. Interesting. Please don't contact him. I said nothing, because by then I was already writing his name down. That night, Daniel came home acting almost normal. He made pasta, asked about my next route, talked about a client issue at work. moved around the kitchen like we were just a tired married couple dealing with something painful but manageable. Every now and then, he touched my elbow or tried to meet my eyes with that soft, wounded look he used when he wanted to be forgiven before he had earned it. I played along. Did not mention the backups. Did not mention Sienna. Did not mention the fact that I now knew his confession had probably been trimmed down to the safest version possible. The DNA test got scheduled for 2 weeks out. That gave me time. And if there is one thing I know how to do, it is drive a long road without blinking. At bedtime, Daniel curled against me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe. And somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the nausea, beneath the humiliation, a colder thought settled in. He really believed I was still on his side. He had no idea the woman next to him was already learning how to destroy every lie he had left. 3 days later, I left on a 10-day haul with a packed cooler, a full tank, and a husband who stood in the driveway pretending to look devastated. Daniel asked me that morning if I could postpone the run. He said he needed me home, said this was bigger than work, said he was scared and did not want to go through the next 2 weeks alone. I remember tightening the strap on my duffel bag and looking at him over the hood of my truck. His face was pale, eyes puffy, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he had not really been drinking. If someone had taken a picture right then, he would have looked like the abandoned one. "Can't postpone," I said. "Bills don't pay themselves." His mouth tightened. "This isn't just bills, Natalie. I'm pregnant." I held his gaze. "And someone's going to need diapers, doctor visits, and a college fund. So yes, bills." That landed exactly the way I intended. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold enough that he heard the warning inside it. He folded his arms. "You're always working." I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. That same complaint, polished and repackaged. The same one Sienna had repeated back to me on the phone. Like he had given them both matching scripts. "You're never home." We were basically over. I was lonely. I needed someone. It is amazing how often cheating starts with someone trying to turn your responsibilities into a moral failure. "I'll be back before the appointment," I told him. "That's what matters." He gave me the cold shoulder for the next 20 minutes, which was almost a relief. Sulking was easier to tolerate than fake tenderness. When I finally climbed into the truck, he stood on the porch with one hand over his stomach, his expression arranged into something fragile and tragic. He wanted me to carry that image with me, wanted me to doubt myself halfway through Nevada or Utah or wherever I happened to be when guilt set in. Instead, I put the truck in gear and drove away without looking back twice. Once I was out on the highway and the house had shrunk to nothing in the mirrors, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. The road steadied me. It always had. There is something about the predictability of a route that calms the parts of me people rarely see. Mile markers, weight checks, fuel stops, dispatch calls, weather patterns, traffic reports. I know what to do with those things. Human betrayal is messier. It slips through your hands. But data? Data sits still if you know where to find it. And now I had plenty of data. The first night, parked outside Boise with my curtains drawn and my dinner balanced on a paper plate, I checked the location sharing on Daniel's phone. At 6:07 p.m., he left work. At 6:24, instead of heading home, he turned east and drove across town. At 6:41, he parked at an apartment complex I had never seen before. He stayed there for 2 hours and 19 minutes. Then he drove home. I took screenshots of every ping, saved them into a folder labeled Daniel Timeline. At 11:03 that same night, there were 6 calls between his number and Sienna's. Not long calls, quick ones, under 3 minutes each. The kind people make when they are coordinating details, not having deep emotional conversations. By the time I brushed my teeth in the tiny sleeper cab sink, I was no longer wondering whether the affair had continued after the confession. It had, obviously. The next day I drove straight through most of Idaho into Utah, fuel stop near Tremonton, coffee so bad it tasted medicinal, and by late afternoon I checked again. Work. Then a stop at a pharmacy. Then home. No apartment complex that night, which almost annoyed me. Once you start tracking something ugly, part of you wants consistency. You want the proof to keep arriving in neat rows so the fury has somewhere efficient to go. On day 3, outside Cheyenne, it happened again. He left work at 5:52. He drove to the same apartment complex, stayed there from 6:11 until 8:48, then went home. I cross-referenced the address against the little bit of information I had on Sienna from company directories and public records. Bingo. Same complex. Different building number than I expected, but the same address block. She lived there. I sat in my truck that night, lights from the rest area washing across the windshield, and felt something settle in me. Not heartbreak. That had happened already in the kitchen. This was clarity. Daniel had stood in our house, cried into my shoulder, thanked me for not giving up on him, and then gone right back to the woman he claimed was a mistake. That mattered. It mattered legally. It mattered emotionally. It mattered because it turned his confession into what it really was. Not remorse, just management. He was not trying to repair the marriage. He was trying to control the fallout. On the fourth night, I called Veronica again. She picked up on speaker, and I could hear the clatter of dishes in the background. Tell me you ate something that wasn't gas station sushi before calling me this late. I have proof he's still seeing her. Silence for half a second. Then, good for the case. Bad for your blood pressure. What kind of proof? I walked her through the location history, the address match, the call logs, the timeline. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Keep collecting. Don't confront. Not yet. He thinks I'm still deciding whether to stand by him." "Excellent," she said. "You sound way too happy about that." "I'm happy because stupid people get sloppy when they feel safe. Let him feel safe." I leaned back in the driver's seat. The truck was idling low. A CB crackled somewhere nearby, someone joking about chain restrictions farther north. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary night. My life somehow split in two between that ordinary world and the private one where I was documenting my husband's lies. "He asked me to stay home," I said. "Of course he did. He said he was scared." Veronica snorted softly. "Pregnancy did not make him honest, Natalie. It made him inconvenient to himself." That line stayed with me. Inconvenient to himself. Yes, that was exactly what this was. By day 5, I was in Iowa fueling up just after sunset when the biggest notification yet popped up on my screen. Location update. Hotel downtown. I froze with the nozzle still in the tank. Check the timestamp again. 9:02 p.m. I stepped away from the pump, heart thudding hard enough that I could feel it in my neck. Maybe there was an explanation. A work event, a dinner nearby, a wrong ping. At 9:37, he was still there. At 10:14, still there. At 11:31, the phone finally moved. He left the hotel and drove home. I stood in the fluorescent wash of that truck stop with diesel on my hands and the night air cold against my face and understood with total certainty that Daniel had not merely resumed the affair after confessing. He had escalated it. A hotel, cash maybe, or his card if he was feeling bold. Either way, a hotel while supposedly waiting for a DNA test that was deciding the future of our marriage. The audacity of it made me lightheaded. The next morning, I called the hotel from a blocked number while parked at a rest area outside Des Moines. "Hi," I said, putting just enough strain into my voice to sound worried. "I'm trying to track down my husband. He mentioned staying with a friend at your hotel last night. Daniel Mercer?" There was the click of keys. Then, "I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't disclose guest." "He's pregnant," I said quietly, "and high risk." It was a terrible thing to say, manipulative and false in spirit, if not technically in detail. But by then, I was long past caring about moral elegance. The woman on the line hesitated. "I can confirm he checked in briefly last night," she said, "but I can't give further details." "Was he alone?" Another pause. Then silence thick enough to tell me what I needed. "Thank you," I said and hung up. I took a screenshot of the location, logged the call, wrote down the time. Then I sat there for almost 10 minutes, staring out over the empty stretch of highway beyond the rest stop, feeling fury press so hard against the inside of my ribs it was almost physical. Because part of me, a humiliating part, had still wanted there to be a limit. A bottom. Some line he would not cross once everything was already hanging by a thread. But there was no bottom with Daniel, just opportunity. When I got home after the 10-day run, he was in full husband mode. The house was spotless. My favorite dinner was on the stove. Candles lit. Soft music playing in the kitchen. He wore the blue sweater I once told him made him look trustworthy, which nearly sent me into orbit. He smiled when I came in, relieved and cautious at the same time, like he had spent 10 days rehearsing what version of himself I might be willing to accept when I returned. "How was the drive?" he asked. "Long. You look tired." "I am." He came close enough to touch my arm, but stopped just short, giving me the chance to choose. That was one of his more infuriating talents. He knew how to mimic respect while still steering the room. "I made your favorite," he said. I looked past him at the table. Pasta, garlic bread, wine already poured, a setup, an atmosphere, a reconciliation scene he had staged for himself. "That's thoughtful," I said. His shoulders loosened a little. He really thought this might work. Over dinner, he talked about work, talked about being exhausted, talked about how strange his body felt, talked about the upcoming appointment with a nervous softness that might have moved me once. I nodded where necessary, asked almost nothing, watched him. And the strangest thing was how ordinary he looked. That was what betrayal does to you. It takes a face you know better than your own sometimes and makes it feel like a costume. Same mouth, same hands, same wedding ring glinting against the wine glass. But every familiar thing starts looking rented. That night, as we loaded the dishwasher together, he said, "I've been thinking a lot. Dangerous hobby." He gave a weak little smile. "I mean it. About what happens if the baby isn't yours." I dried my hands slowly and waited. "What happens then?" he asked. "We deal with it." "Would you stay?" There it was. Not grief, not remorse. Negotiation. He wanted numbers, odds, terms. He wanted to know how much damage he could survive. That's a pretty big ask, I said. But you love me. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. At the nerve in his jaw twitching under the skin. At the fear beneath the performance. At the selfishness still sitting there, whole and intact, even now. We'll see what the results say, I told him. He looked disappointed. I slept in the guest room that night. He did not argue, which told me something too. People fight hardest for what they think they still own. By then, on some level, he knew I was slipping out of reach. The next morning, he was quieter than usual, moving around the house with the stiff caution of someone who senses the air has changed but does not know where the danger is hiding. He drank tea instead of coffee because it was easier on his stomach. He kept one hand absently against the lower curve of his abdomen, protective in a way that might have looked tender to anyone else. To me, it looked theatrical. Not fake exactly, but curated. Every emotion Daniel had ever shown me now came with a question mark. By noon, I was in the garage, supposedly checking tire pressure equipment for my next run while actually reviewing everything I had collected. Messages, calls, location logs, the apartment complex, the hotel, the timeline of his confession against the timeline of continued cheating. There was more than enough for a divorce. But I was no longer thinking only about divorce. I was thinking about exposure, about precision, about how some people do not understand the truth unless it arrives in front of witnesses. That afternoon, I called Sienna again. This time she answered on the first ring, voice tight. What do you want? I smiled a little at that. No hello, no pretending not to know who I was. Progress. I wanted to ask how serious Daniel made things sound. A pause. I told you already. Tell me again. She exhaled sharply. He said your marriage was dead. He said you two were basically roommates. He said you were never around and that when you were home, you barely spoke. What else? That you didn't want kids. Interesting. I tucked that away. Because Daniel and I had talked about kids many times. Not urgently, not with a calendar and doctor appointments, but enough for me to know that was a lie, tailored specifically for Sienna. He said he felt alone, she continued, and for the first time there was something in her voice that sounded less like defensiveness and more like humiliation. He said you made him feel like an obligation. That almost made me feel sorry for her. Almost. Because if a man will cheat with you, he will lie to you too. That should not be a revelation to any grown adult. Does your fiancé know you're still seeing him? I asked. Silence. Then, what? The apartment, the hotel. Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had gone small. You tracked him? I tracked my husband. You're crazy. No, I said, I'm prepared. Then I hung up. That call did two things. First, it confirmed she had no idea how much I knew. Second, it confirmed she was still protecting him even while panicking for herself. Which meant if I wanted the full collapse, I could not rely on either of them to tell the truth voluntarily. I would have to put truth in a room where lying got harder. By the time the DNA appointment was 2 days away, I had already made up my mind. I found Connor's contact information with less effort than I expected. Engagement announcement on social media, tagged photos, a public profile through his small construction business, office number, then cell. People leave trails everywhere. Most just assume no one motivated enough will bother following them. I bothered. When I called, he sounded relaxed, professional, friendly, the voice of a man still living inside the version of his life that made sense. Connor Wells. Hi, Connor. My name is Natalie Mercer. Okay. I'm Daniel Mercer's wife. He was quiet. Then, careful now. All right. I think you should know your fiancé has been sleeping with my husband. Nothing on the line for 2 full seconds. Not breathing, not speech, just silence. Then, who is this really? I gave him 3 details only Sienna's affair partner's wife would know. The Henderson Project. The apartment complex. The pregnancy. By the time I finished, his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. You have proof? Yes. I want to see it. You will. He swallowed audibly. When? At the DNA clinic, I said. 2 days from now. He did not speak. I think everyone deserves the truth in the same room, I said. Don't you? When he finally answered, his voice had hardened into something flat and dangerous. Text me the address. I did. Then I sat in my truck in the dark garage, engine off, hands still on the steering wheel, long after the message delivered. The house above me was quiet. Daniel was upstairs, moving around the bedroom, probably moisturizing, probably checking his phone, probably still convinced he was managing a difficult situation with admirable honesty. What he did not know was that the walls around him were no longer walls. They were hinges, and in 48 hours, every door he had been hiding behind was going to swing open at once. The morning of the DNA test started too quietly. That was the first thing I noticed. No storm, no dramatic silence, no shaking hands, dropping coffee mugs, just that eerie kind of calm that shows up right before something breaks in public. Daniel moved around the kitchen in pale gray sweatpants and one of my old college hoodies. sipping tea because coffee had started making him nauseous. He looked tired in a way that might have earned sympathy from anyone who did not know what I knew. His hair was pulled back. His wedding band flashed when he reached for the sugar. He looked like a husband under stress. A husband in trouble. A husband trying. It almost made me angry enough to smile. "You ready?" he asked. I was standing by the sink, rinsing out my mug. "For the appointment?" I said. "As ready as I'm going to be." He nodded, not meeting my eyes for long. The fear was there now, and it was real, but not for the reasons he wanted me to believe. He was afraid of uncertainty, afraid of consequence, afraid of losing control over a story he had been managing one lie at a time. Not afraid of what he had done. That part mattered. He had spent the last 2 weeks acting fragile and remorseful, but genuine remorse changes your behavior. It does not send you back to the same woman's apartment. It does not book hotel rooms while your wife is crossing state lines for work. It does not ask for patience while still cheating. "Do you want to ride together?" he asked. I dried my hands slowly. "No, I'll meet you there." His face shifted just slightly. "Why?" "I'd rather have my own vehicle." He started to say something, then stopped. He was learning finally that pressing too hard with me only made things worse for him. "Okay," he said. "I'll text you when I leave." I almost laughed at that too. He still talked to me like I was someone who needed updates. I left 20 minutes after him, but I did not go straight to the clinic. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away behind a Walgreens and sat in my truck with the engine off, watching the minute hand crawl. Connor had already texted me that he was on his way. I had sent him the clinic address, the time, and one sentence after that. "Bring your composure, you'll need it." He had replied with only 2 words. "I understand." Sienna did not know he was coming. Daniel did not know either of them were coming. And that was the whole point. My phone buzzed once at 9:12. From Daniel. "Here, waiting room is crowded." I let the message sit. At 9:17, Connor texted. "Parking now." I locked my phone, stepped out of the truck, adjusted my jacket, and walked the rest of the way. There are moments when your body knows before your mind does that you have crossed into a new phase of your life. Walking into that clinic felt like that. Automatic doors sliding open, air conditioning too cold, the smell of disinfectant and stale coffee, pregnant couples and nervous family members scattered in molded chairs under fluorescent lights, soft instrumental music trying and failing to make the place feel calm. Daniel stood when he saw me. For a split second, he looked relieved. Then he saw my face, read nothing there, and his relief turned cautious again. "You made it," he said. "Clearly." He gave a nervous little smile that died on its own. He had dressed carefully. Dark jeans, cashmere coat, clean sneakers. The version of himself that looked respectable, sympathetic, worth giving the benefit of the doubt. He always knew how to dress for the role he wanted people to cast him in. I sat beside him, but not close enough for our knees to touch. He was holding his phone, baby name site open, of course. He angled it toward me. "What do you think of Elias if it's a boy?" I looked at the screen, then at him. "I think you're very committed to the aesthetic of this." His expression tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means you're shopping for names in a room where you still don't know who the other parent is." His jaw flexed. He put the phone down. A nurse at the desk called another name. Somewhere to the left, a toddler started crying. A man in a blue windbreaker coughed into his elbow. The whole room kept moving in that dull, ordinary way public places do, while private disasters are unfolding inside them. Daniel lowered his voice. "You've been cold ever since you got back." I stared ahead. "Interesting observation." "I'm serious, Natalie." "So am I." He shifted in his seat. "I know I hurt you." That nearly did it. Not because it was sincere, because it was so tidy. "I know I hurt you." As if he had dented my car backing out of the driveway. As if this were one injury, one event, one clean mistake. Before I could answer, the doors opened again. Connor walked in. He was taller than I expected. Broad shoulders, navy work jacket, baseball cap in his hand. Not dressed for a clinic. More like he had come straight from a job site or tried very hard not to look like he cared what he was wearing when his life was being rearranged. His eyes found me first. Then Daniel. And in the exact space between those two things, Daniel realized something was wrong. His whole body changed. Not dramatically. That would have required honesty. But I saw it in the tightening around his mouth, the stillness in his shoulders, the way his hand went instinctively to his stomach and stayed there. "Natalie," he said quietly, "who is that?" I turned to him. "That," I said just as quietly, "is Connor." He blinked. I let it land. "Sienna's fiancé." For 1 second, Daniel looked like he had forgotten how to breathe. Then all the color drained out of his face so fast it was almost beautiful. "What did you do?" I folded my hands in my lap. "I invited everyone who deserves the truth." His voice came out as a whisper. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious." Connor crossed the waiting room without rushing. That was the part I respected most. He did not storm in, did not point, did not make a scene immediately. He walked like a man carrying something heavy and trying not to drop it in front of strangers. When he stopped in front of us, he looked at Daniel first. Not me. Daniel looked away. That told Connor everything. "You," Connor said. Just that one word. Daniel stood too quickly. Connor, I can explain. No, Connor said. You can start by not insulting me. A woman across the room glanced up from a magazine. Daniel's breathing had gone shallow now. Natalie, he said, turning to me, voice thin with panic. This is insane. No, I said again. This is transparency. Isn't that the word you used? He stared at me like he wanted to reach into my skull and rearrange me back into the wife he thought he could control. A door opened down the hall, and then Sienna walked in. She saw Connor first, then me, then Daniel. And the expression on her face was so pure, so stripped of polish, that for the first time since this began, she looked exactly like what she was. Caught. She stopped so hard her purse slipped off her shoulder. Connor turned to face her slowly. Nobody said anything for a moment. The waiting room seemed to inhale around us. Then Sienna said, "What is this?" Connor laughed once, no humor in it. "That's a fascinating question coming from you." Her eyes snapped to me. "You told him?" I gave him the opportunity to stop being humiliated in private. Daniel stepped toward her. "Don't," Connor said. That one word cracked like something solid hitting tile. Sienna's face had gone from white to pink to angry in under 10 seconds. "You had no right," she said to me. The irony almost warmed me. "No right?" I asked. "You slept with my husband while I was on the road and I'm the one out of line?" Daniel was sweating now. "Natalie, not here." I stood up. The nurse at the desk was openly watching. 3 other people were pretending not to. "Not here?" I repeated. Interesting standard from someone who had no problem involving our house, my bed, your office, her apartment, and a hotel. Connor's head turned sharply towards Sienna. "Hotel?" She shut her eyes for half a second. And there it was, the extra fracture. She had not told him everything either. Daniel tried again, voice low and urgent. "Can we take this outside?" "No," Connor said. "No," I said at the exact same time. Sienna crossed her arms over her chest like anger could cover shame. "This is harassment." "No," Connor said, looking at her now with something colder than anger. "This is information." Daniel turned back to me, and I saw the moment calculation returned. Panic first, then strategy. It was almost mechanical with him. He softened his face, lowered his voice, tried to make me the unreasonable one in a room full of witnesses. "You're upset," he said. "I understand that. But this is private medical information. You don't get to drag other people into it because you're hurt." There he was, my husband, trying to build a moral high ground on the rubble of his own affair. I smiled at him then, small and sharp. "And yet somehow," I said, 3 adults are already involved." His lips parted, but nothing came out. A nurse in lavender scrubs approached us carefully. "Is everything all right over here?" Daniel answered first, which did not surprise me. "Yes," he said too quickly. "Just a misunderstanding." Connor looked at the nurse. "No," he said evenly. "It is not a misunderstanding. It is a paternity situation involving infidelity." Half the waiting room went still. The nurse blinked. Sienna muttered, "Oh my God." Daniel looked like he wanted the floor to open under him. The nurse cleared her throat. "I'm going to need everyone to lower their voices." "We're perfectly calm," I said, which, to be fair, was true for exactly one of us. Daniel turned on me again, his composure slipping for real now. "You ambushed me. I informed the other people whose lives you were blowing up. You had no right to contact Connor. You had no right to sleep with his fiancée." Connor looked at Daniel and said quietly, "Don't make me hit you in a prenatal clinic." That nearly broke the tension for me, not because it was funny, but because it was so sincere. Sienna grabbed Connor's sleeve. "Can we please not do this here?" He shook her off. "No, we're doing this where it started mattering." A doctor stepped into the waiting room then, clipboard in hand, expression already tired in the way doctors look when they have walked into mess before breakfast. "Daniel Mercer?" Daniel looked at him like a drowning man spotting land. "That's me." The doctor took in the room fast. Me standing, Connor rigid with fury, Sienna blinking too quickly, Daniel one wrong sentence away from shaking apart. "Is there a problem?" he asked. I answered. "There are multiple possible genetic contributors," I said calmly. "We felt it was best to include all relevant parties." The doctor's brows lifted. Sienna looked at me like she might lunge. Daniel hissed, "Natalie!" But I kept going. My husband informed me that his pregnancy may involve either me or Ms. Hart. Since her fiancé was unaware of the affair, I believe full transparency was appropriate before testing proceeded. The doctor turned slowly toward Daniel. That was a glorious moment. Not loud, not theatrical. Just a professional man in a white coat looking at my husband as if he had instantly become much more complicated than the chart in his hand suggested. "I see," he said. Daniel looked cornered now, and that was because he was. He had built his whole plan around private management. Quiet confession, selective honesty, emotional framing. He could maybe survive one betrayed wife, maybe one affair partner, maybe even one nervous DNA appointment. But not witnesses, not overlapping truths, not a room where every lie collided with another person's memory. Sienna took a step backward toward the exit. Connor noticed and moved in front of her without touching her. "Oh no," he said. "You do not get to vanish now." She stared at him. "Move." "No." This is insane. He leaned down slightly, not threatening, just close enough that she had to hear him clearly. What's insane, he said, is me finding out my fiancé has been sleeping with a married man because his wife had the decency to tell me herself. Sienna looked at Daniel then. Not Connor. Not me. Daniel. And the look on her face had changed. The panic was still there, but now rage was bleeding through it. Because she understood what he had done. He had told her what he told all useful people, whatever kept them compliant. Probably told her I was checked out. Cold. Nearly gone already. Probably let her believe she was special and chosen and somehow different from the woman who shared his mortgage and bed. Now she was standing in a clinic beside his wife and her own fiancé, and the fantasy had nowhere left to hide. Did you tell her we were over? Sienna asked him. Daniel stared. Connor went still. I did not move. Sienna's voice got louder. Did you tell me your marriage was basically dead? Daniel swallowed hard. This isn't the time. Oh, it's exactly the time, Connor said. The doctor rubbed his forehead once, like he was revising every expectation he had for his morning. All right, he said. We are not doing this in the waiting area. Mr. Mercer, Miss Hart, Mrs. Mercer. Sir, I need everyone in separate consultation rooms immediately. A receptionist had already picked up the phone, probably to warn the rest of the staff that they were about to inherit chaos. Daniel looked at me with something close to hatred now. That, more than anything, told me I was finally seeing him clearly. The softer manipulations were gone. The pleading was gone. What remained was resentment that I had ruined the version of events where he got to confess on his terms and stay centered in everyone's sympathy. As the nurse led us down the hall, Daniel fell into step beside me. You're enjoying this, he whispered. I did not even look at him. No, I said. I'm just done protecting you. He flinched. That one finally got through. They put me in a small consultation room with a tissue box, fake plant, and framed print of a beach. I doubted anyone had ever found comforting under fluorescent lights. Through the wall, I could hear muffled voices rising and falling. One of them was Sienna's. One of them was Connor's. Daniel's voice came through once, sharp and defensive, before someone in staff mode cut him off. I sat there with my hands folded and waited. There is a specific kind of stillness that comes after you do something irreversible. Not regret, not relief exactly, just the deep physical knowledge that the bridge behind you is gone. That was what I felt in that room. A nurse came in first to explain procedural basics, then the doctor. He was brisk now, all professional distance. We can collect samples from all relevant parties, he said, but I need everyone cooperative, and I need everyone to understand that this is a medical setting, not a forum for conflict. Understood, I said. He looked at me for a beat longer, maybe realizing I was the only one in the building not in danger of combusting. When I was done, I was sent back to the hall, and that was when I saw Daniel coming out of another room. He looked wrecked, not theatrically sad, not polished, wrecked. His eyes were red. His mouth flattened into a line so tense it looked painful. For the first time since the kitchen confession, he seemed less like a man steering a crisis and more like a man being dragged behind one. He stopped when he saw me. This didn't have to happen like this. I tilted my head. Really? You humiliated me. That word, humiliated. Not betrayed, not dishonest, not cruel. Humiliated. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. You did that yourself, I said. I just made sure you didn't get to do it in private. His face hardened. I was trying to be honest. No, you were trying to get in front of the evidence. Something flickered in his eyes then, a tiny flash of recognition, because he knew I was right. And that made him furious. Sienna came out next, face blotchy, mascara smudged, jaw set hard enough to crack a tooth. Connor followed behind her, no longer speaking at all. That silence in him was worse than yelling. It looked final. Nobody touched anybody. Nobody apologized. Nobody even tried. The doctor spoke to all four of us near the nurse's station. Results would take about a week. Minimal contact recommended. No harassment. No more disturbances on clinic property. He used that practiced calm voice people in healthcare learn when human mess keeps spilling into fluorescent places not built for it. Daniel kept his eyes on the floor. Connor signed something on a clipboard without reading it. Sienna stood with both arms wrapped around herself. I listened, nodded, and said very little. When it was over, Daniel realized his car was blocked in. By mine. I had parked that way deliberately. He looked at me across the lot, the understanding hitting him 1 second too late. You planned that too? Yes. He made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a curse. Connor looked from him to Sienna. You can get home however you want, he said to her, voice flat. But it won't be with me. Then he walked away. Just like that. No big cinematic exit, no last speech, no threat. Sometimes the cruelest thing a person can do is remove themselves without leaving any hope behind. Sienna called after him once. He did not turn around. Daniel stood there in the cold light of the parking lot, one hand on his stomach, the other clenched so tight the knuckles had gone white. Then he looked at me, and for one split second I saw exactly what he thought this would be. A confession. Some tears, some softening. A private negotiation inside the marriage. Maybe some counseling. Maybe some lies polished into compromises. Maybe a baby used like mortar to patch what he had broken. Instead, he was standing in a clinic parking lot after being exposed in front of staff, his affair partner, her fiancé, and his wife, with no idea what part of his life would still be standing by the time the results came back. He got into my truck without speaking. The drive home was 32 minutes. In minute 4, he started crying. In minute 7, he started yelling. In minute 11, he said I had made a hard situation cruel on purpose. In minute 15, he said I had destroyed any chance we had of recovering. In minute 19, he asked how long I had been planning this. In minute 22, he said Sienna had pressured him. In minute 26, he said Connor would never have known if I had not meddled. In minute 29, he said I was punishing him for telling the truth. That one finally made me speak. I kept my eyes on the road. You still went to her apartment after the confession, I said. Silence. Then I added, you went to a hotel too. Nothing. I glanced over just once. His face changed. Small shift. Huge meaning. How long have you been tracking me? He asked. Long enough, I thought. Aloud, I said, long enough. The rest of the drive happened in silence so dense it felt like weather. When we got home, Daniel went straight upstairs and slammed the bedroom door hard enough to rattle the frame. Seconds later, I heard him on the phone. Probably Sienna, maybe his mother, maybe both, trying to get ahead of the story, trying to build a softer version before the truth settled into place. I went to the garage, shut the door, and called Veronica. She answered on the second ring. Well? I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, clinic wristband still tight around my arm. It went perfectly, I said. There was a pause. Then, that sounds almost terrifying coming from you. I had witnesses. Connor saw everything. Sienna came. Daniel melted down. Staff separated us. It's all blown open now. Veronica let out a slow breath. Good. File tomorrow. Before the results? Especially before the results. I looked up at the dim bulb over my workbench, at the tool chest underneath it, at the quiet order of my garage, the one place in my house that still made sense. He says I humiliated him. That is not a legal argument. He says he was trying to be honest. He was trying to control timing. There's a difference. I smiled without meaning to. She knew me too well. What next? I asked. You organize everything tonight. Screenshots, calls, location data, timeline, names, dates, backups. Then we file first thing in the morning. I closed my eyes for a second. Above me, the house creaked softly, pipes knocking, floorboards settling. Somewhere upstairs, the man I had married was probably still crying into a phone, trying to rearrange the disaster into something survivable. But some things once witnessed cannot be folded back into secrecy. All right, I said. And in that moment, sitting in the dark garage with the smell of motor oil and cold metal around me, I understood something with absolute clarity. The DNA results no longer felt like the real turning point. The real turning point had already happened. It was the moment Daniel looked at me in that waiting room and realized I was no longer the woman helping him survive the consequences. I was the consequence. I did not sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't need to. There are nights when your body demands rest, and then there are nights when your mind locks onto something and refuses to let go until it's finished. This was the second kind. I sat in the garage with the overhead light on, a 3-ring binder open in front of me, and built my case like I was mapping a route. Clean, precise, no wasted motion. Tabs labeled in black marker. Messages call logs, location data. Timeline witnesses financials. Every screenshot printed. Every date aligned. Every contradiction highlighted. Daniel's confession. Sienna's messages. The apartment visits. The hotel night. Connor's involvement. Everything. I did not rush it. That was the difference between anger and strategy. Anger wants speed. Strategy wants clarity. Upstairs, I could hear Daniel pacing. Once, around 2 a.m, he came halfway down the stairs and stopped. I heard his weight shift on the wood, like he was deciding whether to come into the garage and try something. Apology, anger, manipulation. I didn't know. Then he went back up. Good choice. By 6:30 a.m., I had everything assembled. By 7:15, I had emailed Veronica a scanned copy of the entire binder. At 8:02, she called. I've seen enough, she said. We're filing today. Good. You're asking for full property retention? Yes. No alimony? No. Clean break? Completely. She paused. You understand this is going to feel aggressive to a judge on paper. He cheated. Multiple times. Continued after confession. Lied about the timeline. Lied to her. Lied to me. I know, she said, and we'll make that clear. I leaned back in the chair. I don't want half measures, Veronica. I wouldn't take you as the type. We filed at 9:11 a.m. Daniel was served at 2:03 p.m. At his desk, in front of his coworkers. A man in a suit walked into his office, asked for him by name, and handed him the envelope that ended his marriage. I did not have to be there to see it. I knew exactly how it would go. The confusion first, then the color draining, then the quick glance around to see who was watching, then the forced calm, then the spiral, My phone started lighting up at 2:05. Call, missed. Call, missed. Call, missed. By 2:20, there were 12 missed calls and 6 voicemails. By 2:30, there were 17 calls and a string of texts. Pick up. We need to talk. What is this? Natalie, answer me. You can't do this. Please call me back. I did not respond. I saved everything. By the time he got home at 6:07, I was in the kitchen making coffee. He slammed the front door so hard the frame shook. The envelope hit the tile a second later, papers sliding out across the floor. What is this? He demanded. I took a sip. What does it look like? You're divorcing me? Yes. His voice cracked. Because of one mistake? I set the mug down slowly. 4 or 5 mistakes with Sienna, I said, according to her, plus however many with the hotel, plus whatever you were doing in March with the Denver conference. He froze. That was the tell. What? He started, then stopped. Too late. I tilted my head slightly. Rick, right? I said, from the Denver office? His mouth opened, closed. Then he looked away. Confirmation. Not even clean denial. Just collapse. You've been spying on me, he said. I've been protecting myself. That's insane. What's insane, I said, is you thinking I would sit in that kitchen and believe the version of this you handed me. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, agitation spilling out in jerky movements. You went through my stuff. You tracked me. You contacted Connor. You turned that clinic into a circus. You turned our marriage into a lie, I cut in. He stopped. We stood there, facing each other across the kitchen that had once felt like ours. Now it felt like a stage. You're punishing me for being honest, he said. That again. That word. Honest. I almost admired the consistency. You weren't honest, I said. You got caught. He flinched. You got pregnant and couldn't hide it, I continued, so you told me just enough to control the fallout. That's exactly what it is. His breathing got heavier. You think you're better than me right now? He snapped. You think this makes you righteous? I think this makes me done. That landed harder than anything else I had said, because there was no heat in it. Just finality. He switched tactics then. Fast. Always fast. Tears. Real or not, I didn't care anymore. I'll fix this, he said, voice breaking. I'll cut her off completely. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever you want. We can still fix this. I watched him, really watched him, and saw it clearly for the first time. Not love, not remorse. Fear. Fear of losing the house. Fear of losing stability. Fear of losing control. I'm going on a run, I said. He blinked. What? Leaving tonight, back in 12 days. His face twisted. You're just leaving? Yes. We're in the middle of this. No, I said. You ended this. I'm finishing it. He stepped closer. You can't just walk out. I can. His voice rose. I'm pregnant, Natalie. There it was. The shield again. The card he kept trying to play. I met his eyes. Maybe with my child, I said. Maybe not. That hit. You don't even care, he demanded. I care, I said. Just not the way you want me to. Silence. Heavy. Ugly. He looked at me like he was searching for something. Some crack, some hesitation, some leftover version of me that would bend if he pushed hard enough. He didn't find it. You can't kick me out, he said finally. Yes, I can. This is my house too. No, I said, it isn't. That stopped him. You're not on the deed, I continued. Not on the mortgage. Check the paperwork if you need to. His face changed. That was a different kind of fear. Practical. Immediate. You're serious, he said. Yes. You're actually serious. You have 12 days, I said. Pack your things. Leave the key on the counter. He stared at me, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked small. Not because I was louder, because I was no longer participating. That is what most people do not understand about control. It only works if the other person stays in the game. I wasn't. I went upstairs, packed my bag, and came back down. He was still standing in the kitchen, frozen. You're really doing this, he said. Yes. His voice dropped to something quieter. After everything we've built? I picked up my keys. You destroyed that, I said. And then I left. The road out of the city felt different that night. Lighter. Not because the situation was resolved, because it was finally moving in one direction. No more circling. No more waiting for him to decide what version of the truth I was allowed to have. Just forward. 3 days into the run, somewhere between Flagstaff and Phoenix, the call came. Dr. Harris's office. Ms. Mercer, the receptionist said, the DNA results are ready. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Can you email them? A pause. We prefer to deliver results in person. I'm out of state. Another pause. Longer this time. I really think you should come in, she said. There are complications. My stomach dropped. Complications. Not mine. Not Sienna's. Something else. What kind of complications? I asked. I can't discuss that over the phone. I looked out at the stretch of desert ahead. Heat waves rising off the asphalt. Nothing but distance. How soon? I said. As soon as you can. I ended the call. Pulled off at the next exit. Sat there with the engine idling and the AC humming, staring at nothing. Because suddenly, for the first time since this started, I wasn't thinking about Daniel. I was thinking about the baby. If it was mine, if it wasn't, if this tied me to him forever, if everything I had done so far was just the beginning of something I couldn't walk away from. I picked up my phone, called dispatch. Family emergency, I said. I need someone to take my load. Then I turned the truck around. 18 hours, one stop. No sleep. Just road, headlights, and the low, steady thrum of the engine, as everything I thought I understood about the situation shifted again. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked wrong. Empty. Quiet. Daniel was gone, like I told him, but he hadn't left clean. The living room was stripped, the couch gone, the dining table gone, chairs missing, even the TV I bought on Black Friday, gone. Petty. Predictable. On the bathroom mirror, written in lipstick. Hope you're happy. On the fridge. This is what you wanted, right? I stared at the notes for about 3 seconds. Then I wiped them off. Because none of that mattered anymore. Not the furniture. Not the drama. Not even Daniel. Not yet. Because whatever those complications were, they were about to rewrite everything. The next morning, I sat across from Dr. Harris in her office. Diplomas on the wall. Family photos on the desk. Professional calm in her expression. The kind doctors wear when the news isn't simple. Ms. Mercer, she said, the results are unusual. I leaned forward slightly. Just tell me. She nodded. You are not the biological mother. I exhaled slowly. Expected. Okay. She folded her hands. Ms. Hart is also not the biological mother. I blinked. Wait. A beat. Then, neither of you are. Silence. The air in the room changed. What? I said. Dr. Harris slid a folder across the desk. The fetal DNA does not match either sample. I stared at the paper. Words. Numbers. Markers. Then the conclusion. Clear. Cold. Undeniable. Not mine. Not Sienna's. A third woman. Somewhere. Unknown. My voice came out quieter. There's someone else? Yes. I leaned back slowly. All of it. Everything. The confession. The crying. The chaos. The clinic. The divorce. The exposure. And the baby wasn't mine. Wasn't hers. It was someone else entirely. I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my chest for weeks. And then Dr. Harris said, there's one more thing. I looked up, and whatever was about to come next, I knew it was going to be worse. There's one more thing. I remember the way Dr. Harris said it. Careful. Measured. Like she had already decided there was no gentle version of what came next. I sat back in the chair, the paper still in my hand, the words not a match burned into my vision. Go ahead, I said. She nodded once. When we ran Daniel's blood work, we found something else. My grip tightened slightly. Okay. She took a breath. He's not currently pregnant. For a second, the sentence didn't land. It just hovered, like a sound that hadn't reached meaning yet. I'm sorry, I said. What? Dr. Harris kept her tone steady. It was what's called a chemical pregnancy. Very early. It ended naturally within the first few weeks. Silence. The room felt too small. The hormone levels were still elevated when he took the home test, she continued. That's why it showed positive. And there was still enough fetal DNA in his bloodstream when we did the prenatal draw to run the analysis. I stared at her. So, there's no baby? No viable pregnancy, she said. It had already ended. I looked back down at the results, then back at her, then down again. Let me get this straight. Daniel cheated with Sienna, and at least one other woman. Got pregnant. Didn't know who the other mother was. Confessed partially. Dragged me into 2 weeks of manipulation. Went right back to cheating. Set off a chain reaction that destroyed his marriage. And the pregnancy didn't even exist anymore. It had been gone. Before the test. Before the clinic. Before the spectacle. Before everything. I let out a slow breath. It came out almost like a laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was absurd. How certain is this? I asked. Completely, she said. We confirmed it through multiple markers. I nodded once. Can I get copies of everything? Of course. She handed me a full packet. Lab results. DNA analysis. Clear documentation that neither I nor Sienna matched. And confirmation of the chemical pregnancy. Official. Stamped. Final. I thanked her, stood up, and walked out of the office without saying anything else. I sat in my truck for a long time before starting the engine. Hands on the wheel. Eyes forward. Mind catching up in pieces. All that chaos. All that destruction. All that careful planning on my part. And it turned out Daniel had burned everything down. For nothing. No baby. No future complication tying me to him. No shared responsibility. Just a mess of his own making. I picked up my phone and called Veronica. She answered immediately. Tell me. I exhaled. You're not going to believe this. Try me. I told her everything. The third woman. The mismatch. The chemical pregnancy. By the time I finished, she was laughing. Not cruelly. Not lightly. Just incredulously. You're kidding. I wish I was. Nat, she said, still half laughing. This is the cleanest case I've ever seen. Because there's no baby. Because there's no baby. And because he managed to implicate himself with multiple partners while trying to control the narrative. I leaned my head back against the seat. He didn't even know. That almost makes it better, she said, from a legal standpoint. Better. Cleaner, she corrected. Adultery, multiple partners, continued after admission, Documented behavior, public exposure, no child complicating custody. This is a straight line to a full win. I closed my eyes for a second. What if he fights it? Let him try. Her voice sharpened. We have everything. Location data, messages, witnesses, DNA proof that he lied about the scope. And now this. I looked at the folder in my lap. He's going to find out. Yes, she said, and it's going to break whatever version of reality he's still clinging to. Daniel found out the same way I did. Dr. Harris called him in separately. I didn't go. I didn't need to. By the time I got home, I already knew how it would unfold. The denial, the confusion, the slow realization, the collapse. My phone started lighting up again around 3:40 p.m. Call, call, call. 17 missed calls in under half an hour. Then the texts. We need to talk. This doesn't change anything. Please answer. Natalie, please. I didn't respond. Veronica had been very clear. No contact. Let everything go through lawyers. Let him sit in it. 3 days later, he showed up at the house. I had already changed the locks. Schlag deadbolts. The good kind. I saw his car pull up from the front window. He got out too fast. Walked straight to the door. Knocked once. Twice. Then started pounding. Natalie, open the door. I didn't move. You can't keep me out of my own house. I still didn't move. His voice cracked. I know you're in there. Neighbors started noticing. Mr. Miller across the street stepped out onto his porch with a drink in his hand like he'd been waiting for entertainment. Daniel kept going. Anger now. Desperation. You think you've won? This doesn't change anything. I picked up my phone. Dialed? Yeah, I said calmly. I need an officer at my address. My estranged husband is trespassing and refusing to leave. That word. Estranged. It felt clean. Accurate. 12 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. A younger guy and an older woman. They listened. They asked for paperwork. I handed them the deed. My name only. The divorce filing. Proof of service. They turned to Daniel. Sir, you need to leave the property. He tried to argue. Tried to pivot. Tried to claim rights he didn't have. They didn't care. Leave now, the older officer said, voice flat. Or we will remove you. That did it. He left. Tires screeching. Anger bleeding into recklessness. I watched from the window and felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not sadness. Just absence. 2 days later, his lawyer contacted Veronica. He was contesting the divorce, claiming emotional distress, claiming abandonment, claiming I had thrown him out during a miscarriage. That part almost impressed me. The audacity to weaponize something he hadn't even told me about. Veronica responded with everything. The full evidence package. Organized. Time-stamped. Irrefutable. A week later, his lawyer dropped him. Flat out refused to continue. He said he can't represent this, Veronica told me. I wasn't surprised. Daniel wasn't done. He escalated. Called my employer. Tried to report me as unstable. Said I was a danger on the road. That I was having emotional breakdowns. That I shouldn't be driving. My boss, Randy, called me in. What the hell is going on? He asked. I laid everything out. Divorce papers. Evidence. DNA results. The whole story. He read through it slowly. Then leaned back. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I know. He nodded once. Take 2 weeks off. Paid. Get this sorted. I blinked. You're not suspending me? He snorted. I'd have to be an idiot to believe that call over this. He tapped the folder. And if your ex calls again, I'll file harassment charges myself. That mattered more than I expected. Not because I needed the job. Because it confirmed something. Daniel's version of reality wasn't holding up anywhere. Then he tried a restraining order. Claimed I had threatened him. Stalked him. Made him feel unsafe. We went to court. I sat there quietly while he spoke. While he painted himself as the victim. While he tried to rebuild a version of events that no longer existed. Then Veronica stood up. Presented the call logs. Hundreds of calls from him. 0 answered by me. Presented the timeline. His visit to the house. My call to the police. His continued contact. My silence. The judge listened. Then looked at Daniel. Filing false claims wastes this court's time, she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. If you bring another motion like this, I will hold you in contempt. Daniel sat down. And for the first time since this started, he looked defeated. Not scared. Not angry. Defeated. But he still had one move left. Social media. A long post. About the miscarriage. About how I had abandoned him. About how I had thrown him out while he was grieving. About how I was cold. Cruel. A monster. It spread fast. Shares. Comments. People picking sides. People who didn't know me suddenly had opinions. I didn't respond. Didn't defend myself. Didn't engage. I just took screenshots. Saved everything. Waited. And then, Connor, he commented. Long. Detailed. Attached evidence. Messages. Timeline. The clinic. The truth. Line by line. And just like that, the narrative flipped. The post disappeared within an hour. But screenshots don't disappear. People saw. People understood. People apologized. Too late. It didn't matter anymore. Because by then, Daniel had already lost everything that mattered. He just hadn't accepted it yet. And I wasn't done. Not quite. By the time Daniel's social media story collapsed, the noise around it didn't matter anymore. Not the comments. Not the apologies. Not the people quietly deleting what they'd said about me 2 days earlier. Reputation is loud when it's breaking, but quiet when it settles. And by then, mine had already settled. His hadn't, and I still had one move left. There's something most people don't think about when it comes to long-haul trucking. You don't just move freight. You move through people. Different cities, different stops, same routes over and over again until faces start to stick. Conversations repeat. Names become familiar. You build a network without ever trying to. One of those people was Marcus, HR at Daniel's company. We met 3 years earlier outside Dallas when his car died at a truck stop, and I helped him jump it with my battery pack. We stayed in touch after that. Nothing deep, just occasional check-ins, holiday messages. Hope you're still alive out there, kind of friendship. I called him 2 days after Connor's comment blew everything open. He picked up on the second ring. Natalie, damn, it's been a minute. Yeah, I said, I need a favor. He laughed lightly. That tone sounds expensive. It's not money. That got his attention. What's going on? I told him. Not everything. Just enough. Affair. Coworker. Public exposure. Divorce. He went quiet halfway through. Daniel Mercer? He asked. Yes. And Sienna Hart? Yes. A longer pause. I've heard rumors, he said carefully. Office talk. People noticed. I figured. What do you need from me? Does your company have a policy on workplace relationships? That pause again. Then a sigh. Yeah, he said. Strict one. After a lawsuit a few years back, they locked everything down. No undisclosed relationships, especially not between coworkers, especially not involving married employees. Creates liability. What happens if someone reports it? If it's documented, he said, immediate investigation, interviews. If it checks out, termination, no exceptions. I looked at the folder sitting on my passenger seat, the same one I had built that night in the garage. What if the report came with evidence? I asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had changed. That would trigger everything. Would they ignore it? No, he said, they can't. I nodded to myself. Thanks, I said. He exhaled slowly. You didn't hear any of this from me. I didn't hear anything. We hung up. I spent that night rebuilding the binder. Not for court this time. For HR. Cleaner. Sharper. More clinical. No emotion. Just facts. Timeline. Messages. Call logs. Location data. Proof of overlap. Proof of continued contact. Proof of deception. Everything arranged like a report instead of a story. Printed it at a FedEx office the next morning. High-quality paper. Clear ink. Professional. Then I mailed it. Anonymous. Certified. So I would know when it arrived. It took 3 weeks. 3 quiet, steady weeks. No drama. No calls. No unexpected knocks at the door. Just distance. Work. Silence. Then my phone rang. Daniel. I stared at the screen for a long time. First time I'd considered answering in months. Then I picked up. I didn't say hello. Neither did he. You did this, he said. His voice was different. Not sharp. Not controlled. Shaking. I didn't do anything, I said. You got me fired. There it was. Final collapse. You got yourself fired, I said. You had an affair with a coworker. You left evidence everywhere. You violated company policy. You sent that report. Prove it. Silence. He couldn't, because I hadn't left anything to trace back to me. I lost everything, he said. My job, my career, my reputation. I leaned back in the chair. You lost those things the day you decided it was worth it, I said. His breathing hitched. I can't pay rent. That surprised me. Not because I cared. Because it was real. Stripped down. No performance. I'm going to lose my apartment. I said nothing. I have nothing left. There it was. The truth. No manipulation. No framing. Just consequence. You had something, I said finally. You chose something else. Silence. Then, he started crying. Not the controlled kind. Not the version he used in the kitchen. Real. Messy. Breaking. I listened. For a few seconds. Then I ended the call. The divorce finalized 2 weeks later. Clean. Complete. Exactly as Veronica predicted. I kept the house. My truck. My personal vehicle. My accounts. My tools. Everything in my name stayed mine. Daniel got his personal belongings. His car. And the bill. $28,000 in legal fees. Court ordered. He tried to argue he couldn't pay. The judge didn't care. Consequences don't adjust themselves for convenience. Sienna didn't fare any better. Connor left her the same day as the clinic. Took the ring. Cut contact. Word spread at the company about the investigation. About the termination. About the reason. People talk. Especially when the story is this clean. 2 coworkers. Affair. Evidence. Fired. Done. She lost her job. Her engagement. Her reputation. All in the same month. And the third woman? The one neither of us knew. She surfaced eventually. Through emails. Through timelines. Through people connecting dots. She had her own life. Her own consequences. Another relationship that didn't survive contact with the truth. That's the thing about this kind of mess. It never stays contained. It spreads. A year later, I met someone. His name is Ethan, another driver. We crossed paths at a way station in Nevada. Same day. Same line. Started talking while waiting. Nothing dramatic. No instant spark. Just normal. He was honest. Straightforward. Didn't over-explain. Didn't perform. We exchanged numbers, started talking on long stretches of road, CB radio at first, then texts, then calls, then visits when routes lined up. It's been 8 months now. We're taking it slow. No rush, no pressure. And the strangest thing, that feels better than anything I had before. Because for the first time, there's no guessing. Last I heard, Daniel was still in the city, working retail management. Nothing close to what he had before. Still telling versions of the story where he was misunderstood. Still trying to soften what happened into something survivable. Some people never stop rewriting, even when the ending is already written. Me, I don't think about him much anymore. Not out of effort. Out of absence. That part of my life closed clean. No loose threads. No unanswered questions. No what if. Just cause and effect. He thought he was managing a situation. Thought he could confess just enough. Control just enough. Balance just enough. He thought he was playing carefully. What he didn't realize was that he had already lost the moment he decided the truth was something he could shape. Because the truth doesn't need help. It just needs time. And once it has that, it doesn't ask permission to destroy everything built on top of it.